The winter of 1878 descended upon the Dakota Territory with a cruelty that even the oldest settlers could not recall witnessing. Snow fell in sheets so thick that a man could lose sight of his own boots, and the wind howled across the frozen prairie like the collective screams of every soul who had ever perished in that unforgiving land. Silas Harrow had seen 37 winters, but none had gripped his bones with such persistent malice as this one. He stood at the window of his cabin, watching the white curtain obliterate the horizon, and somewhere deep in his chest, a familiar emptiness reminded him that he would face this storm alone, as he had faced everything alone since Margaret had closed her eyes for the final time 4 springs ago. The cabin itself was a testament to survival rather than comfort. Silas had built it with his own hands during the summer of 1871 when hope still lived in his heart, and Margaret's laughter still filled the spaces between hammer strikes. Now the logs had darkened with age, the chinking repaired so many times that patches covered patches. But the walls held firm against the assault of wind and snow, the stone fireplace drew properly, and the root cellar remained dry enough to preserve provisions that would carry him through until spring. He turned from the window and crossed to the fireplace where a cast-iron pot hung over flames. The stew inside had thickened to mortar consistency, but it would sustain him. Silas ate without tasting, his thoughts drifting to the fence line that would need checking once the storm passed. Wolves had taken 2 of his cattle in November, and he could not afford to lose more. Morning arrived with brutal clarity. Silas woke to silence so complete that for a moment he wondered if he had gone deaf. Then he heard the soft tick of settling snow against the roof, and he understood that the storm had finally spent its rage. He rose dressed in layers of wool and leather and forced the cabin door open against a drift that reached nearly to his waist. The sun had climbed high by the time Silas reached the fence line. At the 7th post, he noticed the tracks. They emerged from the tree line to the east, a series of impressions in the snow that the wind had partially filled. Silas crouched to examine them. Not wolf, not deer. These tracks had been made by something moving on 2 legs, something that had staggered and stumbled, something that had fallen more than once and risen again with diminishing strength. He rounded the largest pine and stopped. The child lay curled at the base of the tree, partially buried in snow. She was small, perhaps 6 years old, with black hair that spread across the white ground like spilled ink. Her clothing was deerskin, decorated with beadwork in patterns that Silas recognized as Lakota. Her lips had turned the color of bruised plums, and her skin had taken on a waxy pallor that spoke of hypothermia advanced well beyond easy recovery. Then she shivered. Without conscious thought, Silas stripped off his heavy coat and wrapped it around the child's body. He lifted her from the snow, cradling her against his chest, and began moving back toward the cabin at the fastest pace the drifts would allow. He added wood to the flames with hands that trembled, building the fire until it roared with heat. Then he began the work of warming the child, wrapping her in every blanket he possessed, placing heated stones from the fireplace near her body. Her breathing remained shallow, but the shivering increased in intensity, and Silas knew that shivering was good. Shivering meant fight remained in this small form. The child spoke at midnight. Kaya. Her voice carried the weight of everything she had lost. My name is Kaya. Silas felt something shift inside his chest, some wall he had constructed 4 years ago, developing its first crack. Kaya, he said, you are safe now. You are going to live. Her eyes opened, dark eyes black as the winter sky reflecting the firelight with an intensity that seemed to belong to someone far older. She looked at him without fear, with an understanding that no child should possess. Then her eyes closed again, and she slept. Something had changed in the night. This child had altered the fundamental equation of his existence. He was no longer alone in this cabin. And for the first time in 4 years, Silas Harrow found himself hoping that the spring would bring something more than survival. The dawn that followed was the coldest Silas could remember. On his 3rd trip to gather wood, he noticed tracks in the fresh snow. Not the staggered footprints of a struggling child this time, but something larger. Something that had circled the cabin during the night. Wolf. A large one, probably from a pack pushed south by the harsh conditions. It had come close to the door, had probably smelled the child inside. The wolf came back at midnight. Silas heard at first a scratching at the door that sent ice through his veins. He rose from the chair and crossed to the door, his rifle in hand. He lifted the latch and threw the door open in a single motion, raising the rifle as he moved. The wolf stood perhaps 10 feet away, its eyes catching the firelight and reflecting it back with an eerie golden glow. For a moment, man and beast regarded each other across the frozen threshold. Then Silas pulled the trigger. The shot shattered the night's silence. The wolf twisted sideways, hit, but not killed, and disappeared into the darkness. Not a killing shot, but enough to discourage return. Enough to demonstrate that this cabin was not prey to be taken easily. Kaya had awakened at the sound of the shot, her dark eyes wide with fear, that slowly transformed into recognition. The acknowledgement of one survivor to another, that danger had been met and turned aside. "The wolf will not come back tonight," Silas said. "You should sleep." Kaya watched him for a long moment. Then she spoke, her voice carrying authority that seemed impossible in one so young. "My mother is coming." Silas felt the words strike him with almost physical force. "Your mother, how do you know?" "She promised she would find me. She told me to hide, to survive, to wait. And I have waited. Now she is coming." "Then we will wait together," he said finally. "When she comes, she will find you here, safe and warm and alive." The second day after the child's arrival dawned clear and bitter cold. Kaya sat up in the bed, her dark eyes fixed on the window, with an intensity that suggested she could see something beyond the frost-covered glass. "Is she close?" Kaya turned her gaze from the window to him. "She is hurt, but she keeps walking." Returning to the cabin, Silas found Kaya standing at the window, her small hand pressed against the glass. "Look," she pointed toward the north. Silas followed her gestures, squinting against the glare of sunlight on snow. Then movement caught his eye, a dark shape emerging from the trees, staggering and falling and rising again, with desperate determination. Silas was out the door before conscious thought had time to intervene. The figure ahead had collapsed again, and he could see now that it was a woman whose size and build exceeded his own, a woman whose dark hair spread across the snow like a banner of defiance. He reached her and dropped to his knees. She was breathing barely. Her clothing was shredded in places, revealing wounds that had frozen rather than healed cuts, and burn marks covering her arms and torso. Blood had dried in streaks across her face, but her eyes opened when Silas touched her shoulder, and in those eyes burned a fire that the cold had not managed to extinguish. "My daughter." The words emerged as barely more than a whisper. "Where is my daughter?" "She is safe. She is in my cabin, warm and alive. You found her. You found us." "Ayana. My name is Ayana." Silas carried her back to the cabin. Kaya had opened the door and stood in the threshold, tears streaming down her face. When Silas entered and laid Ayana on the bed beside the fire, the child threw herself onto her mother's chest, her sobs the only sound in a room that had fallen into sacred silence. Ayana's arms rose to embrace her daughter with a tenderness that seemed impossible given their battered condition. She murmured words in a language Silas did not understand, and Kaya responded in kind, mother and daughter reuniting in a moment that transcended the divisions of culture and language. When Ayana's eyes found his over Kaya's head, when her gaze locked onto his, with an intensity that seemed to pierce through flesh to the soul beneath, he understood that this moment included him. "You saved her," Silas shook his head. "She saved herself. I just found her. No white man has ever done what you have done. No white man has ever shown my people anything but contempt and violence." Silas met her gaze without flinching. "Then consider me the exception." The afternoon was devoted to tending Ayana's wounds. The cuts on her arms were deep but clean, likely inflicted by blades. The burn marks on her torso formed patterns that suggested deliberate cruelty, and the bruises that covered her legs and back spoke of a beating sustained over hours. Only when Silas finished wrapping the last bandage did Ayana speak, her voice carrying the flatness of someone recounting events too terrible for emotion. "They came at dawn, 3 days ago. White men, but not soldiers. Hunters. They were looking for bounties, scalps they could sell to traders who do not ask questions about origins. Your people dead, all of them. The elders, the children, everyone who could not run. I hid Kaya in a hollow beneath a fallen tree. I told her to stay silent, to wait for me. Then I ran the other way, drawing the hunters after me. And they caught you, yes. They caught me, they hurt me. They thought they had broken me. But while they celebrated their victory, I found a knife. And when they slept, I used it." The words hung in the air between them. Silas looked at this woman, this warrior who had endured torture, and responded with lethal efficiency and felt something stir in his chest that he had thought dead since Margaret's passing. How many three? There were three. There are no more. The hunters, he said carefully. Did they have associates? Ayana's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. I do not know. They spoke of a camp, a larger group waiting somewhere to the south. When they do not return, their companions may come searching. How soon? Days, perhaps. A week. And when they come, they will not show mercy. Not to me, not to Kaya, and not to anyone who has sheltered us. Then we will be ready for them, Silas said finally. You need time to heal. Kaya needs time to recover. This cabin has survived winters and wolves and worse. It will survive whatever comes next. Ayana studied him for a long moment. Why? Why would you risk yourself for strangers, for people your kind has spent generations trying to destroy? Silas considered the question. He thought about Margaret, about the child who had never drawn breath, about the years of solitude that had hollowed him out. Because what happened to you was wrong. Because that child deserves a chance to grow up. Because I have lost too much to stand by while others lose everything. And because you are no longer strangers. You are here. You are under my roof, and that makes you my responsibility. Ayana's eyes glistened with tears that still refused to fall. We are safe, Ayana told Kaya, her voice soft but certain. This man has given us shelter. He has saved you. We are safe. 2 weeks passed since Ayana's arrival, and the cabin had transformed in ways that went beyond physical arrangement. Silas had constructed a second sleeping platform, fashioned curtains from spare blankets. These modifications spoke to a future he had not planned, but found himself building nonetheless. Ayana's strength returned fully by the end of the second week. Her body demonstrated recuperative powers Silas had never witnessed. Within days, she was moving freely, her strength returning in increments that soon exceeded his own. Kaya flourished under the combined attention of two adults who had both lost so much. She learned English from Silas with astonishing rapidity. In turn, she taught him words in her mother's tongue, laughing at his pronunciation. One evening, while Kaya slept and the fire burned low, Ayana sat beside him at the table. Tell me about her, Ayana said quietly. Margaret. Her name was Margaret. We were married 6 years before she died, and the child a boy. He never drew breath. They died together during a fever that swept through the territory. There was nothing anyone could do. Ayana reached out and placed her hand over his. My people believe that death is not an ending. It is a doorway. Those we lose wait on the other side, watching over us. Your Margaret, your son. They are not gone. They are merely elsewhere. Silas turned his hand beneath hers, their fingers intertwining with a naturalness that surprised neither of them. Silas, Ayana said, her voice dropping to barely more than a whisper. I do not know what will happen when the hunters come, but I want you to know something now, while there is still time. She paused, gathering courage. You are a good man, the best I have ever known among your people and among mine as well. And if we live through what is coming, if there is a future beyond this cabin and this winter, I would like to face it beside you. Silas looked at this woman who had entered his life through circumstances neither could have predicted. He thought about Margaret, about the grief that had hollowed him out, and he realized that Ayana was right. They were meant to find each other. Whatever comes, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I am glad you are here, both of you. Ayana smiled. Then together is what we will be. The peace of the morning shattered 3 days later. Silas was in the barn tending to the cattle when he heard it. Horses, multiple horses approaching from the south. He emerged from the barn to find Ayana already standing on the cabin porch, her body tense with alertness. Kaya was nowhere in sight, likely hidden inside at her mother's command. 4 riders appeared at the edge of the trees. Their eyes carried the flat assessment of predators evaluating prey. The lead rider drew his horse to a halt, perhaps 50 feet from the porch. He was a large man, his face hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat. Morning, neighbor, looking for some friends of ours. 3 boys who were supposed to meet us at a camp about a week ago. Never showed. You wouldn't happen to have seen them. This is private property. I do not receive many visitors. The rider laughed. Thing is, we traced a trail this direction. Our friends were tracking something valuable when they disappeared. And tracking back from where we found them, frozen stiff with their throats cut, well, it leads right about here. Silas kept his face neutral. Sounds like the winter got them before anything else could. A lot of men die out here thinking they are tougher than the cold. The rider urged his horse forward. Winter does not cut throats from ear to ear. Winter does not leave three bodies arranged in a circle. And winter does not take scalps. I told you, I do not receive many visitors. Whatever happened to your friends, it did not happen here. The rider's eyes moved from Silas to Ayanna and back again. That is a mighty big woman you got there. Indian by the look of her. You know our friends were hunting Indians when they disappeared. Silas felt Ayanna stiffen beside him. He reached out and placed his hand on her arm, a gentle pressure. Not yet, not until there is no other choice. The rider smiled. Hand over the squaw and her brat, and we will call it even. You can go back to whatever sad little life you had before they showed up. I think Silas said, his voice calm despite the fire building in his veins, that you boys should turn around and ride out the way you came. This is my land. These are my people, and you are not welcome here. The rider's smile faded. Your people. Mister, that squaw is worth $50 in any trading post. That brat is worth another $25. You think we are going to ride away from $75 because some dirt farmer asked nicely? Silas's hand moved to his pistol. The other riders responded in kind. I think Silas repeated, you are going to ride away because the alternative is dying here. Today. Right now. He drew the pistol in a motion faster than conscious thought, the barrel leveling at the lead rider's chest. And I am not asking. The standoff froze the world into crystalline stillness. 4 men on horses faced 1 man on a porch, weapons drawn. The lead rider's eyes narrowed, calculating odds. You are fast, but there are 4 of us and 1 of you. Even if you get me, my boys will cut you down. Maybe, but you will still be dead, and somehow I do not think your boys are that attached to your cause. Then the rider on the far left spoke, his voice young and uncertain. Jake, maybe we should come back later, with more men. The lead rider turned his head slightly to glare at his companion. The momentary distraction was all Ayanna needed. She moved with speed that should have been impossible for someone her size. Her hand closed around a throwing knife, the blade leaving her fingers with a whisper of disturbed air. It struck the rider nearest to her position, burying itself in his throat with precision that spoke of years of practice. The man toppled from his horse without a sound. Silas fired in the same instant, his bullet finding Jake's shoulder and spinning him sideways in his saddle. The remaining 2 riders wheeled their horses, panic replacing calculation. Ayanna was already moving toward them, a second knife appearing in her hand. The riders fled, their horses churning through snow as they raced for the tree line. Silas could have fired, could have dropped at least one of them before they reached cover, but something stayed his hand. Dead men could not spread warnings, and warnings might give them time to prepare. They will come back, Ayanna said quietly. More of them, many more. Silas nodded. How many do you think the camp they mentioned? If it is where I think it is, there could be a dozen men, maybe more. We cannot fight that many. Not here, not in the open. Where would we go? There is a place. In the mountains 2 days from here. My people used it as a refuge when enemies pressed too close. The trails leading to it are narrow and defensible. Your people. Are there survivors? I do not know. I sent messengers before the attack warning the other bands. Some may have listened. The decision crystallized in Silas's mind. He looked at Ayanna, looked at the cabin door where Kaya now stood, watching them with wide, frightened eyes, and he understood that home was not a place. Home was the people who filled a space with meaning. Then we go to the mountains, tonight before they can regroup. You are leaving everything. No, Silas shook his head, his eyes moving from her face to Kaya's. Everything I need is coming with me. As the light began to fade, Silas made one final trip to the graves behind the cabin. He stood before the markers he had carved. Margaret Harrow, beloved wife, infant son, Harrow never named. I have to go, he said quietly, speaking to the snow-covered mounds. But I wanted you to know that I am not forgetting. I am not replacing. I am just learning that life can continue even after endings. That love does not diminish when it expands to include others. He touched the cold surface of Margaret's marker, a gesture of farewell. Thank you for everything we had. I hope you understand. The 3 of them departed as darkness claimed the land riding horses that Silas had kept in the barn for years. They rode through the night, pausing only to rest the horses. The cold pressed against them from all directions, But they kept moving, driven by knowledge that stopping meant vulnerability. The final approach to the refuge was everything Ayanna had described. The trail narrowed until walking single file became the only option, the path clinging to cliff faces that dropped away into chasms filled with shadow. The sun had begun its descent toward the western peaks when they finally crested a ridge and found themselves looking down into a valley that seemed to exist outside time. Surrounded on all sides by mountains, the valley floor spread before them in a carpet of white, and there nestled against the far wall of stone smoke rising from openings in the rock were signs of human habitation. Ayanna stopped, her body rigid with emotion. They are here, my people. Some of them survived. They were spotted before they reached the valley floor. Figures emerged from the shelter of the trees, moving to intercept them with weapons ready. Then a voice called out in a language Silas did not understand. Ayanna responded in kind, her tone carrying relief and joy. A man stepped forward from the group, his face weathered by age and hardship. He studied Silas with eyes that missed nothing. Ayanna spoke again, gesturing toward him, toward Kaya, telling the story of their meeting and journey. The man listened without interruption. When Ayanna finished, he spoke a single sentence that caused Ayanna to release a breath she had been holding. He says, "You are welcome here," she translated. He says, "Anyone who protects Lakota children has proven their worth." He says, "You have earned a place among us for as long as you wish to stay." Then the group parted, creating a path toward the shelters, and the three travelers who had begun as strangers walked together into a community that offered something none of them had expected to find again. Home. The days that followed blurred together in a rhythm of recovery and integration. The community in the valley numbered perhaps 40 soul survivors from multiple bands who had heeded warnings and fled to this refuge before the attacks that destroyed those who remained. Silas found himself accepted with a warmth that surprised him, his actions on behalf of Kaya and Ayanna having established credentials that opened doors otherwise closed to outsiders. The men invited him to hunt, teaching him tracking techniques his years on the frontier had not revealed. The women included him in maintaining shelter, and the children, after initial shyness, embraced him with the openness of youth. Kaya flourished in this environment, surrounded for the first time in weeks by others who shared her heritage and spoke her language. She made friends with speed that astounded Silas. On the fifth night in the valley, Ayanna came to Silas, where he sat apart from the main group, watching stars wheel overhead. "The elders have been talking," she said finally, "about what comes next." Silas turned to face her. "And what have they decided? Nothing yet. But there are discussions. Some want to go north. Others want to stay here to rebuild. And others speak of resistance, of fighting back against those who have taken so much. What do you want?" "I want Kaya to grow up somewhere she can be safe, somewhere she can learn who she is without fear." "And you, what do you want for yourself?" Ayanna's eyes found his, holding his gaze with an intensity that made his breath catch. "I want you." The words landed like stones dropped into still water. Silas opened his mouth to respond, but Ayanna continued, "I know that is not the answer you expected. I know we come from different worlds, different peoples." She reached out and placed her hand over his heart. "But in here I see something that transcends those differences. I see a man who acts on principle rather than prejudice. I see a man who saved my daughter without thought of reward." "Ayanna," he began, "let me finish. I do not know what the future holds. But I know this: whatever time remains to me, I want to spend it with you. Not as allies, not as survivors bound by circumstance, as something more. I do not deserve you," he said. "I am a broken man trying to pretend the pieces still fit together. Then we are well matched. I am a broken woman doing the same. Perhaps together we can build something new from the fragments." She leaned forward, her forehead pressing against his. "Plant your seed in me, Silas Harrow. Give Kaya a father who will stay. Give me a partner who will walk beside me through whatever comes. And give yourself permission to live again." "Are you sure?" "Once we cross this line, there is no going back." Ayanna's answer was not words. She closed the distance between them and pressed her lips to his, a kiss that began gentle and deepened into something fierce. When they finally broke apart, Silas knew that something fundamental had changed. The walls he had built around his heart lay in ruins. "Together," he said. "Together," Ayanna repeated, "whatever happens." The weeks that followed were the happiest Silas had known since before the war. He and Ayana built their life together with care each day, adding layers of connection that transformed strangers into partners. They hunted together, worked together, loved together. Kaya accepted the change with the easy adaptability of childhood, simply expanding her world to include the reality that Silas and her mother now functioned as a unit. She called him father without self-consciousness. Spring announced its approach with subtle signs. The snow began to retreat from the valley floor. Birds returned their songs, filling air that had been silent for months. Silas stood at the edge of the community on a morning that felt like renewal. A hand slipped into his small fingers, wrapping around his palm. He looked down to find Kaya beside him. "Father," she said, "are you happy?" Silas considered the question seriously. "Yes," he said finally. "I am happy. Are you?" Kaya nodded. "I have a mother who loves me. I have a father who protects me. I have friends and food and a warm place to sleep." She squeezed his hand. "And I have you, Father Silas. I am very happy." Silas knelt to bring his face level with hers. "And I have you, little one. You and your mother. I could not ask for more." Behind them, Ayana emerged from their shelter. She watched the embrace between her daughter and the man who had become her partner, her expression carrying peace that had seemed impossible weeks before. They walked together toward the center of the community, where others were gathering to discuss the plans for the day. Spring brought its own challenges, preparations for planting and hunting. But spring also brought hope. The valley embraced them as they walked its walls, rising protectively around a community that had survived against all odds. Whatever threats lay beyond those walls, they would face those challenges when they arose. For now, there was sunlight and warmth and the sound of a child laughing. And that was enough. That was everything. Spring unfurled across the valley with patient determination. The snow retreated up the mountainsides each day, revealing more ground beneath. Silas learned the rhythms of planting from elders whose knowledge stretched back generations. He worked alongside Ayana in the fields, their movements falling into patterns that required no discussion. The work was hard, but Silas welcomed the ache. It reminded him that he was alive. Kaya helped where she could, her small hands surprisingly adept at tasks requiring precision rather than strength. Her questions came constantly, each answer spawning three more. One evening, as spring reached its full flowering, the elder who had first welcomed Silas to the valley approached him with an expression that suggested something important was about to be communicated. The man's name was Dakota. "Walk with me." They walked in silence toward the stream that bisected the valley. "You have been with us for 2 moons, Dakota said. "In that time you have worked hard. You have respected our ways. You have cared for Ayana and Kaya with honor. These things have been noticed. I have tried to contribute what I can." Dakota's expression shifted. "There are some among us who question your presence, who wonder if a white man can truly be trusted, who remember what your people have done to ours. I understand their concerns. I can only show through my actions that I am not my people's worst representatives." Dakota nodded. "That is the answer I hoped you would give." He fell silent for a moment. "There is another reason I wish to speak with you. Something that concerns the safety of everyone in this valley." Silas felt his body respond automatically, muscles tensing, senses sharpening. "Our scouts have returned from the lowlands. They report movement, large groups of armed men traveling north following trails that lead toward the mountains, toward us, the hunters. Perhaps, or perhaps something worse. The scouts say these men wear uniforms. They carry themselves like soldiers, and they travel with wagons that bear the marks of the government." Silas felt something cold settle in his stomach. Soldiers represented a different category of threat than bounty hunters. Do they know about the valley? We cannot be certain. The trails that lead here are hidden, but trails can be discovered. Secrets can be betrayed. How long before they reach the mountains' days? Perhaps a week. Dakota turned back toward the stream. "I tell you this because you have a choice to make. If you stay, you become a target alongside us. The soldiers will not distinguish between those who were born here and those who came later. And if I leave, then you return to your own people. You build another life in another place. No one would blame you." Silas stood motionless, the weight of the choice pressing against him. He thought about the cabin he had abandoned, the future he had imagined when Margaret was still alive. He thought about Ayana, about Kaya. "I am not leaving." The words emerged with a certainty that surprised even him. Dakota turned to study his face, searching for hesitation or doubt. Finding neither, the old man nodded once. Then we prepare. Together. Ayana's expression shifted when Silas returned to his place beside her. What did Dakota say? Silas took her hand. Trouble is coming. Soldiers this time, not just hunters. They are moving toward the mountains, and they may find the valley. Ayana's face hardened into the warrior's mask. Her grip on his hand tightened until the pressure bordered on painful. We should call a council. Everyone needs to know. Everyone needs to decide. The council convened at dawn. Dakota spoke first, relating what the scouts had reported. The faces around him reflected a range of reactions from fear to anger to resignation. The debate that followed lasted hours. Some wanted to flee. Others argued for standing their ground. And still others spoke of diplomacy. Ayana stood when it came her turn to speak, her voice carrying across the assembled crowd with authority. She referenced the attack that had destroyed her band, described what she had witnessed and survived, warned about the nature of men who hunted humans for profit. When she finished, silence held the gathering for a long moment. Then Dakota rose. We will not run. We have run enough. This valley has sheltered us when the world sought our destruction. We will not abandon it to those who would take everything we have left. The decision was made. The community would stay and fight. The days that followed transformed the valley from sanctuary to fortress. Silas found himself included in planning sessions where his military experience proved unexpectedly valuable. The valley's geography offered significant defensive advantages. The trails leading in were narrow and easily blocked. Water sources were internal, and the caves that had served as shelter through winter could serve as strongholds if the outer defenses failed. Ayana worked alongside him through the preparations. She showed him hidden paths that could serve as escape routes. She identified positions from which archers could target attackers with minimal exposure. And in the quiet moments between tasks, she spoke to him of fears she shared with no one else. I have seen what happens when soldiers come. I have seen villages burned, families separated, children taken to places where they are taught to forget who they are. She turned to face him. I cannot let that happen to Kaya. Whatever else occurs, she must survive. She must remain free. Silas pulled her close. She will survive. We will all survive. And if we cannot all survive, then she will. I swear it. Ayana's arms tightened around him. I believe you. I do not know why after everything I have seen, but I believe you. The scouts brought word on the 7th day. The soldiers had entered the foothills. At their current pace, they would reach the valley's entrance within 2 days. But this was not 40 men. This was not 50. Hundreds, the scout gasped, his face pale with exhaustion and fear. Hundreds of soldiers, with wagons, with artillery. Silas felt something cold settle in his stomach. Dakota called a final gathering that evening. Tomorrow we send the children and those who cannot fight to the high caves. The paths are narrow enough that adults must go single file. If the worst happens, they can continue over the mountains to the northern territories. There are allies there who will receive them. Those who can fight will take positions at dawn. We know this land, and we know that surrender means death. So we do not surrender. We fight until we cannot fight, and then we fight some more. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd, but Silas saw the truth in their eyes. They knew the odds. They were choosing to die on their feet rather than live on their knees. That night, after Kaya had been settled into sleep, Silas and Ayana stood at the entrance to their shelter. If I do not survive tomorrow, Ayana said quietly, you must take Kaya. You must get her out. Promise me. Silas turned to face her. We will both survive. We will both take her. We will all walk out of this valley together. You are a stubborn man, Silas Harrow. But stubbornness alone does not stop bullets. Then it is fortunate I have other qualities as well. She laughed, a release of tension that had been building for days. Then her expression sobered. I love you. I did not expect to love again after losing everyone. But you walked into my life through a snowstorm and you refused to leave, and now I cannot imagine existence without you. I love you too, and whatever happens tomorrow, that will not change. You have given me a reason to live when I had forgotten what living meant. Ayana's eyes glistened with tears she refused to shed. She pulled him close, her lips finding his in a kiss that communicated everything words had failed to capture. The departure of the families was a scene that Silas knew would haunt him. Children carried on their parents' backs, elders supported by younger arms, faces turned backward for final glimpses of a valley that might soon become tomb. Kaya walked with a family who had promised to care for her as their own. She looked back repeatedly as the distance grew, her expression carrying messages that words could not convey. Silas had knelt before her earlier, searching for words that would convey what needed to be communicated without destroying hope. You are going on a long journey with people who will take care of you until Mama and I can join you. Why cannot you come with me? Because someone needs to stay behind and make sure you have time to get safely away. Because Mama and I are strong enough to do what needs to be done. And because we love you too much to let anything happen to you. Tears had welled in Kaya's eyes. I do not want you to stay. I want us to be together. We will be together again. I promise. Whatever happens, I will find my way back to you. I will never stop trying. Promise on your heart, she demanded. Silas had placed his hand over his chest. I promise on my heart. Nothing in this world will stop me from reaching you. Kaya had clung to them both, her small arms stretched impossibly wide. I will remember. Forever if I have to. When the last of the evacuees disappeared around a bend in the trail, silence fell over the valley. Perhaps 40 warriors remained. Silas took his position at the main entrance. Ayana stationed herself nearby. The soldiers arrived at midday on the second day. Silas watched them emerge from the tree line. The scouts' estimate had been accurate. Hundreds of soldiers in blue uniforms, their discipline evident in movements that wasted no energy. Behind them, mounted officers. And behind those wagons carrying supplies and equipment. At their head rode an officer whose insignia marked him as a colonel. His face was sharp-weathered, carrying the exhaustion of a man who had followed orders for too long. A single rider approached carrying a white flag. The colonel wishes to speak with whoever leads your people. He offers terms for peaceful surrender. I will hear his terms. The colonel himself rode forward. I am Colonel Marcus Webb. I have orders to secure this territory for settlement. You have been offered peaceful surrender. I advise you to accept. Silas met the colonel's eyes. Your offer of peace rings hollow when your purpose is to take what belongs to others. You know you cannot win. You are perhaps 40 fighters against 300 trained soldiers. Courage means nothing against those odds. Courage is all we have. And sometimes courage is enough. Webb's expression shifted into something that looked almost like respect. I will give you until morning to reconsider. After that, I will be forced to take this valley by force. Many of your people will die. Many of mine will die as well. Is that what you want? What I want has never mattered. What matters is what I will do, and I will do whatever is necessary to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Until morning, then. The night passed in preparation. Songs around fires. Stories told in voices that trembled with emotions held barely in check. Silas sat with Ayana watching stars wheel overhead. Do you regret it, any of it? Finding Kaya, taking us in, becoming part of this, not one moment. Finding you and Kaya was the best thing that ever happened to me. Whatever tomorrow brings, I would not trade what we have had for any other life. Tomorrow will not end us. We have survived too much to fall now. We will see Kaya again. Dawn arrived with the cruelty of light that reveals what darkness has hidden. Colonel Webb appeared at the head of his formation. For a moment, silence held dominion over the scene. Then Webb raised his arm and brought it down. The attack began with a volley of rifle fire that shattered stone and sent splinters flying. Silas pressed against cover, feeling bullets impact inches from his head. Return fire came from multiple positions simultaneously. Soldiers in the advancing line fell, but more pressed forward to take their places, the numerical advantage asserting itself with the inevitability of mathematics. Hours passed. The sun traced its arc across the sky. The casualties mounted on both sides. By mid-afternoon, the defenders held only the final positions, their numbers reduced by half their ammunition, nearly exhausted. Ayana appeared beside Silas, her quiver empty. They are preparing something. The wagons are moving. Silas followed her gaze. Then he saw it. A shape being assembled from components carried in the wagons. Artillery. They brought a field gun. A gun of that caliber could reduce their rocky defenses to rubble within minutes. There is a path, Silas said quickly. One Dakota showed me. It circles behind the soldier positions. If I can reach the gun from behind, I might be able to disable it. You cannot go alone. I have to. If I do not come back, remember what I promised. Get Kaya, you will come back. You promised on your heart. Silas kissed her hard and fast. Then he turned and began moving toward the eastern ridge. The path was narrow and treacherous but concealed from observation. He reached the artillery position and dispatched the guards with knife and pistol. He disabled the firing mechanism. Then soldiers discovered him. He fought until his pistol was empty, then drew his knife. More soldiers came. Too many. Silas felt a blade slice across his shoulder, felt the impact of a rifle stock against his ribs. A war cry split the air. Ayanna descended from the ridge like vengeance made flesh other defenders following. The battle dissolved into a melee. Silas fought back to back with Ayanna, and then it was over. But not in victory. Silas stood gasping amid bodies, his vision swimming. Around him, the surviving defenders were being forced to their knees, surrounded by soldiers whose numbers they could not overcome. Perhaps 15 remained of the 40 who had fought. Ayanna knelt beside him, her face battered, but her eyes burning with defiance. Colonel Webb approached his uniform dirty, his expression carrying exhaustion and something else Silas could not immediately identify. You fought well, better than any force I have faced in 20 years of service. You disabled my artillery. You cost me nearly 100 men. Webb paused, his gaze sweeping across the survivors. You have earned my respect, if nothing else. What happens to us now? I have orders to eliminate any resistance. Those orders do not leave much room for interpretation. Then get it over with. Webb was silent for a long moment. His eyes moved across the prisoners, lingering on faces marked by wounds and defiance. There is another option. I can report that all resistance was eliminated, that no prisoners were taken. My men are loyal. They will say what I tell them to say. Why would you do that? Because I am tired. Webb's voice dropped, carrying weight that seemed to age him decades in seconds. I had a son. He was killed 3 years ago in a skirmish like this one, fighting against people who wanted nothing more than to keep what was theirs. After he died, I started asking questions I had never asked before, about the orders we follow, about the people we destroy, about whether the cause we serve is worth the price we pay. He looked toward the valley, toward the beauty that violence had not managed to destroy. This place could have been home to people who deserved nothing but peace, and I took it from them because someone far away decided it should belong to someone else. Today, I make my decision. I will not add more graves to the collection that already haunts my sleep. Let them go, Silas said, urgency filling his voice. Let them go, and I will stay as your prisoner. Do with me what you will. Just let these people live. Webb studied him. You would sacrifice yourself for people who have no claim on your loyalty. They have every claim. They are my people now. I belong to them as surely as I have ever belonged to anything. The colonel was silent for a long moment. Then he turned away. Lieutenant Harris, release the prisoners. All orders were explicit. I am aware of our orders. These people fought to protect their families. They defended their home against invasion. There is no dishonor in what they did, and there will be no dishonor in how we treat them. The bindings were cut from the prisoners' wrists one by one. Webb approached Silas one final time. You have until nightfall to leave this valley. I will keep my men here until morning. After that, we will proceed with our mission. Whatever we find when we proceed, that will determine the official record. Why are you doing this? Make it worth something. Get your people out of here. Find somewhere safe. And do not waste the chance I am giving you. The survivors gathered what supplies could be salvaged. They traveled for days through mountain passes, following routes prepared months before. Eventually, they reached territories beyond the mountains where allies waited. The wounded were treated, food was provided, shelter was offered. But one reunion remained incomplete. Silas had sent messengers north immediately upon arrival, seeking word of the families who had fled before the battle. Days of waiting accumulated into weeks, and still no word came of Kaya. Ayanna bore the uncertainty with stoicism that Silas recognized as protective facade. She is alive. I know it. I feel it. A mother knows when her child has left this world, and I do not feel that absence. She is somewhere waiting for us to find her. The messenger arrived on a morning that had begun like every other. A rider, his horse lathered with the sweat of hard travel. I come from the Northern Territories. I bring word of refugees who arrived there 3 weeks ago, families from a valley in the southern mountains. The rider reached into his saddlebag and withdrew something small. A child asked me to bring this. She said her parents would know what it means. Silas took the object with trembling hands. It was a necklace crudely made from stones and feathers. He recognized it instantly. He had helped Kaya make it during a long winter evening. She is alive. Our daughter is alive. Ayana collapsed against him, sobs breaking through the control she had maintained for weeks. The journey north began the following morning. On the 8th day, they crested a ridge and found themselves looking down into a valley. Smoke rose from fires. Children played among the structures. And then, cutting through the noise of welcome, a single voice. Father Mama Silas turned toward the sound and saw her running toward them, her small legs pumping, her dark hair streaming behind her. Kaya launched herself at them, her arms wrapping around both. You came. I knew you would come. I told everyone. I said my parents would find me. We will always find you. No matter how far, no matter how long, we will always find you. They remained there, the three of them locked together as the world fell away. That night, after Kaya had finally surrendered to sleep, Silas and Ayana sat watching stars emerge. We survived. Against everything, against odds that should have been impossible. We did more than survive. We found each other. We built a family. We created something that destruction could not destroy. Together, forever, as long as I have breath, as long as my heart beats. They sat in silence, two people who had found each other against all odds and refused to let go. Tonight there was peace. There was family. There was love that had proven itself stronger than death. Summer arrived with gradual warming that transformed the valley into something approaching paradise. The crops flourished under careful attention. The hunting remained excellent. Silas threw himself into the work of the community with energy. He helped construct additional shelters. He learned new techniques from those who had practiced them for generations. Kaya grew during these months, visibly taller and stronger. She still called Silas father, the title having become simply part of who she was. One evening, as the three of them sat outside their shelter, watching the sun descend, Kaya turned to her parents with an expression of unusual seriousness. Mama, Father, I want to ask you something. What is it, little one? Are we going to stay here forever? Why do you ask? Because some of the other children say their families might leave, go north or west or somewhere. The white soldiers cannot find them. And I want to know if we are going to leave too. Silas felt his heart constrict at the fear underlying the child's question. What would you want? Ayana asked gently. If the choice were yours to make, Kaya was silent for a long moment. I want to stay. I like it here. I have friends and a home and you and Father. I do not want to run anymore. I am tired of running. Then we stay, Silas said. This is our home now. We fought for it. We bled for it. And we are not going to abandon it because of threats that might never materialize. Ayana looked at him. Are you certain? I have never been more certain of anything. I came to this place because fate put a dying child in my path. I stayed because I found something here I thought I had lost forever. And I am not going to let fear drive me away from the first real home I have known since before the war. Then we stay. Together. As a family. Kaya launched herself at both of them. Forever, promise, forever, forever, Silas said. I promise forever. The evening deepened around them, the three of them sitting together, their bodies intertwined, their futures bound by choice and circumstance, and the stubborn refusal to let go of what they had found. Home was not a place, it was a feeling. It was belonging. It was the knowledge that somewhere in the world people waited who cared whether you returned. And finally, after years of searching without knowing what he sought, Silas Harrow had found it. The summer progressed through its cycles. Word of the valley's existence had spread. Refugees from other bands appeared at the entrance with increasing frequency. The council debated the question of the refugees for many days. Finally, a compromise was reached. Refugees would be accepted, but with conditions. Each family seeking sanctuary must contribute to the community's stores. Those who arrived empty-handed would be given shelter for one moon cycle, after which they must demonstrate their value through labor. Autumn arrived with subtle warnings. The leaves on the deciduous trees began their transformation, green surrendering to gold and crimson. One evening, Dakota sought Silas out. I want to know what you would do if this valley and its people were yours to protect. What would you choose? Silas thought about the question. I would accept the refugees, but I would also prepare. Prepare how this valley is defensible, but it is also a trap. If enemies come in sufficient numbers, if they block the entrance and wait us out, we have nowhere to go. We need alternatives. Escape routes that cannot be easily discovered. Caches of supplies positioned along those routes. Alliances with communities beyond the mountains who might provide sanctuary if this place falls. The council has been debating philosophy, but you speak of practicality, of survival. Philosophy is luxury. Survival is necessity. We can debate the rightness of our choices once we have survived long enough to have the leisure for such debates. Tomorrow I will call another council, and I will ask you to speak. Not Ayana translating your thoughts, but you speaking directly. The community needs to hear your voice. The council convened at midday. Silas stood at the edge of the circle, his heart pounding. Ayana squeezed his hand. You can do this. Speak from your heart. That is what they need to hear. Silas stepped forward into the circle. I am not good at your language, but I ask that you listen, not to my words, to what I mean beneath them. The crowd quieted. You debate whether to accept the refugees. Some say yes, some say no. Both have reasons, but I think the question is wrong. The question is not whether to accept. The question is how to survive what comes after. The soldiers who came in spring were the first. They will not be the last. The government that sent them will send more, not tomorrow, not next month, but eventually. The refugees who come to this valley bring risk, but they also bring strength, hands to work, eyes to watch, warriors to fight if fighting becomes necessary, and they bring hope. Every family that finds sanctuary here is a family that survives. Every child who grows up safe is a future that continues. I do not know what the right answer is, but I know that we cannot choose based only on fear. Fear makes us small. Fear makes us cruel. Fear makes us into the things we fight against. We are better than that. We must be better than that. Because if we are not, then what are we fighting to preserve? Dakota stepped forward. You have spoken well, better than many who have spoken before. We will consider his words alongside all others that have been offered. The council continued for hours. When the gathering finally dispersed, Ayana found Silas. You did well. I do not know if I made any difference. You made them think. You offered a perspective they had not considered. Sometimes that is all anyone can do. They walked back to their shelter. Kaya ran to meet them. Father, what happened at the council? We talked about important things, about what kind of people we want to be, and what kind of people do we want to be, the kind who take care of each other, the kind who help those who need help, the kind who do not let fear make our decisions for us. That is what Mama always says too. Then maybe we are all thinking the same thing. And maybe that means we will figure out the right answer together. They entered their shelter as night fell, the three of them moving in the coordinated rhythm of family. And that was enough. That was everything. The winter that followed was harsh but manageable. The preparations made during autumn proved adequate. Silas adapted to the rhythms of winter life with surprising ease. He studied the language with renewed determination. He learned stories that had been passed down through generations. And he spent time with Kaya, more time than the busy seasons had allowed. Will I ever see these things? She asked one afternoon, after he had told her stories of cities and rivers and machines. The world beyond the valley. I do not know. The world is changing very fast. By the time you are grown, everything might be different again. Do you think it will be better or worse? That depends on what we do now. The future is not something that happens to us. It is something we create through the choices we make today. Then I will make good choices, so the future will be good. That is all any of us can do. Spring returned with reluctance. The snow retreated slowly. The community emerged from its shelters with a patient of creatures testing whether safety had truly returned. Silas felt the seasons shift in his bones. His body demanded movement after months of confinement. He threw himself into the work of preparation with energy that surprised those who had known him longest. Ayana noticed the change in him. Something is troubling you. You work as though chasing something you cannot catch. I feel like I am waiting for something. Something bad. Something that is coming but has not arrived yet. The peace we have found it feels fragile, like a dream that might end at any moment. That feeling never goes away. Not completely. Once you have lost everything, you understand that everything can be lost. The fear of losing again becomes part of who you are. Is there any way to make it stop? You do not make it stop. You learn to live with it. You find moments of joy despite it. And you trust that even if the worst happens, you will survive. Because you have survived before. You feel it too. Every day. Every morning I wake and check that Kaya still breathes. Every evening I watch the horizon for threats that might never come. But I have learned something that helps. Love is stronger than fear. Not because it makes fear disappear, but because it gives you something worth being afraid for. Something worth fighting to protect. I love you. I love you and I love Kaya, and I am terrified every day that something will take you away from me. Then we are terrified together. And somehow that makes it easier. Summer reached its peak and began its slow decline toward autumn. The preparations Silas had championed neared completion. Escape routes had been established. Alliances had been formalized. Everything that could be done had been done. He stood at the valley's entrance one evening, watching the sun descend, when a scout appeared on the trail below. The man was running. Soldiers, hundreds of them coming from the south. They will reach the mountains in 2 days. Have they discovered the valley? I do not think so. Not yet, but they are searching systematically. Every canyon, every pass. They will find us eventually. Gather the council. We have decisions to make. Silas remained at the entrance, watching darkness claim the valley. Whatever happened next would determine whether they survived or fell. And there was no more time for preparation, only time for courage. The council convened within the hour. The scouts report hundreds of soldiers Dakota began. They search methodically. At their current pace, they will discover the entrance to our valley within 3 days. We have 3 choices. We can fight, we can flee, or we can surrender. Silas stepped forward. We cannot fight hundreds of soldiers. The battle we won in spring was against a fraction of that number. A force this size would overwhelm our defenses within hours. Then we flee. Fleeing with this many people, with children and elders who cannot move quickly, we would leave trails that even poor trackers could follow. The soldiers would catch us in open country. Then, what? We split up. The families, the children, the elders. Everyone who cannot fight goes north through the escape routes we prepared. Small groups traveling separately. The warriors stay behind and do what we delay them. We make them pay for every step forward. We buy time for the others to reach safety. And when we can delay no longer, those who survive follow the same routes north. Ayana pushed through the crowd to stand beside him. If you stay to fight, then I stay with you. No, Kaya needs you. She cannot lose both of us. She cannot lose either of us. But if she must lose one, I will not let it be you. Then we stay together. And we trust that Kaya will be cared for if the worst happens. Together, whatever happens. The council reached its decision as dawn began to lighten the eastern sky. The families would depart within hours. The warriors would remain. Silas found Kaya in their shelter. You are going on a journey. A long journey with people who will take care of you until Mama and I can join you. Why cannot you come with me? Because someone needs to stay behind and make sure you have time to get safely away. I do not want you to stay. I want us to be together. We will be together again. I promise. Whatever happens, I will find my way back to you. Promise on your heart. I promise on my heart. Nothing in this world will stop me from reaching you. I will remember. I will wait for you. Forever if I have to. The departure of the families was a scene Silas knew would haunt him. Kaya walked with a family who had promised to care for her. She looked back repeatedly, her expression carrying messages that words could not convey. When the last of the evacuees disappeared around a bend in the trail, silence fell over the valley. Silas took his position at the main entrance. Ayana stationed herself nearby. The soldiers arrived at midday on the second day. Silas watched them emerge from the tree line, hundreds of soldiers in formation. At their head rode a colonel. Then a single rider approached carrying a white flag. The colonel wishes to speak with whoever leads your people. He offers terms for peaceful surrender. I will hear his terms. The colonel rode forward. I am Colonel Marcus Webb. I have orders to secure this territory for settlement. You have been offered peaceful surrender. I advise you to accept. Your offer of peace rings hollow when your purpose is to take what belongs to others. You know you cannot win. Courage means nothing against those odds. Courage is all we have. And sometimes courage is enough. I will give you until morning to reconsider. After that, I will be forced to take this valley by force. What I want has never mattered. What matters is what I will do, and I will do whatever is necessary to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Until morning then. The attack began at dawn with a volley of rifle fire. Hours passed, the casualties mounted. By mid-afternoon, the defenders held only the final positions. Ayanna appeared beside Silas. They are preparing something. The wagons are moving. Silas followed her gaze. Artillery. They brought a field gun. A gun of that caliber could reduce their defenses to rubble. There is a path. It circles behind the soldier positions. If I can reach the gun from behind, I might be able to disable it. You cannot go alone. I have to. If I do not come back, remember what I promised. Get Kaya. Get out. You will come back. You promised on your heart. Silas kissed her. Then he turned and began moving toward the eastern ridge. He reached the artillery position and dispatched the guards and crew. He disabled the firing mechanism. Then soldiers discovered him. Ayanna descended from the ridge with other defenders. The battle dissolved into a melee. Silas fought back-to-back with Ayanna, and then it was over. Dakota appeared. The officers fled. When the gun fell and the line broke, they ran. Silas's legs trembled. The world tilted sideways. You did it. You disabled the gun. You saved us. We did it. Together. Then darkness claimed him. Consciousness returned slowly. Silas opened his eyes to find himself lying on cold ground, his hands bound behind his back. Around him, the surviving defenders knelt in similar condition. Perhaps 15 of the 40 who had remained. Ayanna was among them, her face battered, but her eyes burning with defiance. Colonel Webb stood before them. You fought well, better than any force I have faced in 20 years of service. You have earned my respect if nothing else. What happens to us now, I have orders to eliminate any resistance. Those orders do not leave much room for interpretation. Then get it over with. The colonel was silent for a long moment. There is another option. I can report that all resistance was eliminated, that no prisoners were taken. My men are loyal. They will say what I tell them to say. Why would you do that? Because I am tired. I have spent my career fighting wars that made me question my humanity. I have followed orders that kept me awake at night and haunted my dreams when I finally slept. This place could have been home to people who deserved nothing but peace. And I took it from them because someone far away decided it should belong to someone else. Let them go. Let them go, and I will stay as your prisoner. Do with me what you will. Just let these people live. You would sacrifice yourself for people who have no claim on your loyalty. They have every claim. They are my people now. I belong to them as surely as I have ever belonged to anything. And I will die for them if that is what survival requires. The colonel was silent for a long moment. Then he turned away from the prisoners. Lieutenant Harris. Release the prisoners, all of them. Sir, our orders were explicit. No survivors from hostile forces. I am aware of our orders. I am also aware that I have commanded men for 30 years, and in that time I have learned to distinguish between orders that serve justice and orders that serve nothing but cruelty. These people fought to protect their families. They defended their home against invasion. There is no dishonor in what they did, and there will be no dishonor in how we treat them. The bindings were cut from the prisoners' wrists one by one. Silas rubbed his freed wrists. Ayanna stood beside him. I do not understand. Why would he do this? Maybe some men carry consciences that eventually demand payment. Webb approached them. You have until nightfall to leave this valley. I will keep my men here until morning. After that, we will proceed with our mission. Whatever we find when we proceed, that will determine the official record. Why are you doing this? I had a son. He was killed in a skirmish 3 years ago, fighting against people who wanted nothing more than to keep what was theirs. After he died, I started asking questions I had never asked before, about the orders we follow, about the people we destroy, about whether the cause we serve is worth the price we pay. Today I have made my decision. I will not add more graves to the collection that already haunts my sleep. Thank you. For what it is worth, you have my respect. Webb took the offered hand. Make it worth something. Get your people out of here. Find somewhere safe. And do not waste the chance I am giving you. The survivors gathered what supplies could be salvaged. Silas took the rear position as they evacuated, his eyes constantly scanning for any sign of pursuit. They traveled for days following routes that would be difficult to follow. Eventually, they reached territories beyond the mountains where allies waited. The community that received them was led by people Dakota knew from decades of relationships. The wounded were treated, food was provided, shelter was offered. Days passed as the refugees recovered. Silas's wounds healed. Ayana's injuries eventually responded to care. But one reunion remained incomplete. Silas had sent messengers north immediately upon arrival, seeking word of the families who had fled before the battle. Days of waiting accumulated into weeks, and still no word came of Kaya. Ayana bore the uncertainty with stoicism that Silas recognized as protective facade. She threw herself into work, but at night she would lie awake with eyes that stared at nothing. Silas shared her anxiety without being able to alleviate it. We should have kept her with us. No. She would have died in the battle or been captured when we fell. The choice we made was right, even if the outcome remains unknown. But not knowing is worse than anything. I can face any enemy, endure any hardship, but this uncertainty is destroying me. She is alive. I know it. I feel it. A mother knows when her child has left this world, and I do not feel that absence. She is somewhere waiting for us to find her. And we will. The messenger arrived on a morning that had begun like every other. A rider, his horse lathered with the sweat of hard travel. What news? I come from the northern territories. I bring word of refugees who arrived there 3 weeks ago. Families from a valley in the southern mountains. Children, elders. And the rider reached into his saddlebag and withdrew something small. A child asked me to bring this. She said her parents would know what it means. Silas took the object with trembling hands. It was a necklace crudely made from stones and feathers. He recognized it instantly. He had helped Kaya make it during a long winter evening. She is alive. Our daughter is alive. Ayana collapsed against him, sobs breaking through the control she had maintained for weeks. The crowd around them erupted in sounds of celebration. Silas held the necklace in one hand and Ayana in the other, his eyes blurred with tears. His daughter was alive. His family would be whole again. The journey north began the following morning. Silas and Ayana traveled with a small group, moving as quickly as the terrain would allow. They spoke little during the travel, but they walked together, ate together, slept beside each other. On the 8th day, they crested a ridge and found themselves looking down into a valley that showed clear signs of human habitation. Smoke rose from fires, structures dotted the landscape, and moving among those structures, figures whose size and activity marked them as children engaged in play. Ayana stopped. Her eyes were fixed on the scene below. I cannot see her. There are so many children. What if she is not there? She is there. The messenger brought her necklace. She asked him to find us. She is there waiting. They descended into the valley. Word spread quickly of their arrival. And then, cutting through the noise of welcome, a single voice. Father, Mama. Silas turned toward the sound and saw her running toward them, her small legs pumping, her dark hair streaming behind her face transformed by joy. Kaya launched herself at them, her arms wrapping around both. You came. I knew you would come. I told everyone. I said my parents would find me. And you did. We will always find you. No matter how far, no matter how long, we will always find you. They remained there, the three of them locked together as the community flowed around them with tactful distance. Time lost its meaning. The world contracted to the space their arms enclosed. When they finally separated, Silas looked into his daughter's face and saw changes that weeks had wrought. Her eyes carried something older than before, wisdom accumulated through experiences no child should have to endure. But beneath the changes, the essential Kaya remained. I have so much to tell you about the journey and the people here and the friends I made. Can I tell you everything? Silas laughed. You can tell us everything. We have time now, all the time in the world. They rose and walked together toward the structures that would provide shelter. The community welcomed them with hospitality that felt almost miraculous after everything they had endured. That night, after Kaya had finally surrendered to sleep, Silas and Ayana sat outside their temporary shelter and watched stars emerge. We survived. Against everything. Against odds that should have been impossible. We survived. We did more than survive. We found each other. We built a family. We created something that destruction could not destroy. And now we build again. Somewhere. Anywhere. It does not matter where as long as we are together. Together. Forever. As long as I have breath. As long as my heart beats. Forever. They sat in silence as the stars wheeled overhead, two people who had found each other against all odds and refused to let go. Tonight there was peace. There was family. There was love that had proven itself stronger than death. And that was enough. That was everything. Epilogue. Years passed. The family settled in the northern territories where allies provided sanctuary. Silas and Ayana built a new home with their own hands, a cabin that grew over time as their family grew. Kaya flourished, becoming a woman whose strength matched her mother's and whose wisdom reflected both her parents. She married a young warrior from the community, and in time she brought children of her own into the world. Silas watched his grandchildren play in the snow, their laughter filling spaces that had once known only silence. Ayana stood beside him, her hair now threaded with gray, her face lined with years of joy and sorrow. "Both, we kept our promise," she said softly. "We found her. We stayed together. We built something that will outlast us." Silas took her hand, feeling the strength that still lived in her grip. "We did more than keep a promise. We proved something. That love is stronger than fear. That family is what we choose, not just what we are born into. That even in the darkest winter, spring can come again." They stood together, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and crimson. The same mountains that had sheltered them when the world sought their destruction. Behind them, the sounds of family filled their home. Children laughing, elders telling stories. The rhythm of life continuing as it had continued for generations and would continue for generations more. Silas thought about the journey that had brought him here. A dying child in the snow. A warrior woman who had claimed his heart. A community that had adopted him as one of their own. A life rebuilt from the ruins of everything he had lost. He thought about Margaret, about the son who had never drawn breath, about the grief that would never fully release its grip. But the grief had been transformed over the years. It no longer weighed him down. It had become part of the foundation on which everything else was built. "Love does not diminish when it expands to include others," he said quietly, speaking the words he had first spoken at Margaret's grave all those years ago. "It only grows." Ayana turned to face him, her dark eyes holding his with the intensity he had come to expect. "And it never dies. Not truly. It lives on in the people we love, in the choices we make, in the stories they will tell about us when we are gone." Silas pulled her close, feeling her body against his, the familiar warmth that had sustained him through the coldest winters. "Then we will write stories about us," he said. Tales passed down through generations. About the rancher who saved a child from the snow. About the warrior who found love in the last place she expected. About the family that survived when survival seemed impossible. Ayana smiled, the expression transforming her face in ways that still, after all these years, made his heart ache with its beauty. "And they will say, 'We loved each other,'" she whispered. "That is the only story that matters." The sun descended behind the mountains and darkness gathered around them. But inside the cabin, fires burned warm, and family waited, and the future stretched before them like a promise finally kept.